Adventure time. Come on, grab a friend. Jake the dog and Finn the human. Here we are in adventure time. Quack, quack. Okay, my spirit. Back again after a little delay. Try to get this set up here in more adventure times in psychohistory, which again is our attempt to actually make it a thing. And while it's not really a thing yet, but we're hoping. Because look, I bought the book so we can read it. We're trying to make psychohistory a thing. We're trying to use the lessons of psychology and apply the knowledge in the field of psychology to history, and see where we're see if we can learn anything, just like we would with economics or sociology, from it. We're trying to expand the knowledge base of history with the knowledge base of psychology. Oh, it's so cold. I'm holding my fingers here. Ooh. But before we start, we must do our Tubin check. Thanks to that nitwit on CNN. I have my pants on. Nothing going on. So everybody on YouTube now has to do that. Lots of intellectual master, whatting, but no actual, Jeffrey Tubin. And we will start with our prayer. In the name of Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Thanks, Jack Black, God of Rock. Thank you for this chance to kick ass. We are your humble servants. Please give us the power to blow people's mind with our high voltage rock and reason. In your name we pray. And that's an actual prayer, and we're trying to make that a thing too, because that's my favorite prayer now. It's just so cool. For the endeavor that we are involved in, trying to make psychohistory a thing. And today we're going to ask the question: Is Jordan Peterson a pencil neck geek? And I don't want to beat up on Jordan Peterson because he's a sweetheart and he's a genius and he's really doing a lot of good out there. But he is emblematic of a problem in our intellectuals today. There is a meatheadism. I'm going to call it so I'm going to do like this whole number 10 is going to be focusing on the strains in modernism that are ongoing. So just like there's a frequency wave, there's little bits of frequency that are making up the big frequency wave of modernism, the scientific barbarianism and the moral relativism and feminism and half a dozen other things that how do we get where we are today, and the problems with that. The narcissistic history, the various strains that lead us into this modernism. So hopefully we can get back out of it and get back onto some real reason. And so 10A is going to be the pencil neck geek phenomena. The question is Jordan Peterson a pencil neck geek? Is he one of these modern meatheads? And now I got started on this because he made a cut against the atheists in an argument that I saw where he goes, the atheist types act out a religious structure and criticize it, and that's actually true. But part of the problem is because Jordan Peterson doesn't step up and call them fully out and do that by accepting that what Western civilization is the faith-based recognition of some verified truths that makes it so separate from everything else. For example, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they're endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. And these are verified truths now, because we have 200 years to show that these truths work. But yet he'll play this game of denying the supernatural and as the basis to start from, so that you have so-called natural explanations for everything. And so I'm going to have to start with Hegel. We blame for everything, well, for a lot. And we're going to, in this episode, we're going to try and break down and destroy a couple things. First, we have to destroy. We're gonna have to destroy the dogma of Darwinism. Then we're gonna have to destroy the God of the gaps, randomness, and then we're gonna beat up on the atheists a lot because they definitely deserve it. And then hopefully we're going to settle this question of whether Jordan Peterson is a pencil neck geek. Yeah, I mean, he's not really a pencil neck. He's a sweetheart, but we'll get to it. So anyway, where do we start? So we're trying to psychoanalyze history. We have two huge quotes that we're going against, that we're going on. One is, great minds discuss ideas, Eleanor Roosevelt. Average minds discuss events. Small minds, which is us, discuss people, because we're discussing people. Aristotle, though, way smarter, I think, than Eleanor, says men start revolutionary changes for reasons connected to their private lives. And I've always found people way more interesting than so-called ideas anyway. And so between these two, we're trying to see if there's any value in psychology and psychohistory. Now, a couple episodes ago, we started with Hegel, whose goal was to help bring philosophy, the study of philosophy, closer to a form of science where it can where it can lay aside the title of, quote, love of knowledge, like that's a bad thing. That is what I laid before me. And that was Hegel's idea of what he was trying to do. He was trying to scientificify philosophy. So he reduced all of the supernatural from out of his philosophy and trying to make a materialistic philosophy, okay? And that's why we blame him for so much, and we're blaming him for Marxism, Nazism, and where we are today. Take a step back. So all this age really comes about from Thomas Aquinas's re-upping of Aristotle and causation and the revolt against that. Okay, literally, you could draw that line with Thomas Aquinas, and then all this period all this period to modernism is a rejection of that to a degree. So Aristotle has said, listen, the universe is works as cause and effect. There's an effect, and you can trace that back to a cause. Okay, Thomas Aquinas comes by and says, okay, let's take that rationality, cause and effect, and go, well, wait a minute, that cause, that original cause, had an effect. Was an effect of another cause, and that was an effect of another cause, and so on and so on and so on. And so he says, if you look at it, that's all the universe. And then he adds so now that is proof, Aristotle's proof, and the fact that there is all the way to, a cause and effect for all time and history and the universe and everything you see in your daily lives, to then the idea then there must be a first mover, a first cause that's outside of the system that kicks off the entire system. So Thomas Aquinas sets a philosophical basis for everything that comes after that, for the mechanistic universe. And so Bacon, and they established this scientific method of, around the same time, of analyzing things and trying to find the underlying reasons for why they are. Newton comes along, and applies math to the physical world, and you have physics born, right? Each of them develop penetrate. Each of them penetrate the things that they see in nature, trying to find the mind of God and discover principles that we built this modern, crazy, amazing modern society with. But it's so there's the philosophical basis to that Thomas Aquinas established. Then there's the mathematical and physical basis of the mechanistic mechanism, like the universe is like a mechanism that Newton really sets out, and that all the scientists then come along to fill in a lot of the gaps. Faraday and Maxwell with electromagnetism, chemistry, blah blah blah, and all the rest of it. Interestingly enough, science has really died and stopped since 1900 and since Einstein, because we know for a fact that Einstein's theories are in contrast with quantum mechanics, and there's an inconsistency between the two that has not been settled for over 100 years now, mainly because science has died. Because it's lost, part of it is it's lost its original basis, which is the verified truth of Thomas Aquinas and the scientific methodology that you need to be able to penetrate into nature. You can't purify yourself, and you can't operate in a scientific manner without scientific morality to penetrate nature. And so that's why we have the god of randomness right now. That scientists can just throw up their hands. Oh, it's got to be random. Oh, it's got to be random. But we'll get to that in a second. So Hegel starts that Hume, others started that revolution, Hume and Hegel, and at some point you get this perversion of the scientific method, into this idea that you cannot have, you have to de-theist everything to achieve a natural understanding of things. But for their quote natural understanding of things, then they were led to this idea that okay, you are nothing more than a process of random meat. So you're a process of random atoms hitting off each other into a random accidental creation of life, of mankind, and you yourself. So there is no order, there is no greater order, there is no rationality to life. It's all just blind chance. There's huge problems with that, because that just makes you into nothing but a meathead. And hence Archie Bunker, which we love and adore, great TV show, calling his son-in-law Meathead, and sure enough, Carl Reiner is a meathead. Archie got that one right. And the problem with being a meathead, and then is saying, okay, everything is nothing more than the natural process, is okay. Then you don't believe in things like math, because guess what? There is no such thing as a number 2 in nature. It's not like there's Douglas Adams and somewhere in the universe is a number 42. No, there are no numbers in nature. Math itself is a concept, just like an idea is a concept, just like a mind is a concept, just like a personality is a concept, just like a soul is a concept. And these are all things that you have to believe in to get where we are today, that they deny. They deny physics. They deny math. You cannot find the number 2 in nature. And don't give me any of this. 2 + 2 = 4, because it doesn't. As we know from, we're going to do a whole episode on communism, George Orwell and his wonderful book 1984, because in 1984 2 + 4 does not equal 4. 2 + 4 is equal to 5, Winston, because Winston even at some point was, so in that they have a big rat. Winston's greatest fear is rats, and so they take his head and they put it in a bag filled with rats, and they bite him until he comes out and says, I believe 2 + 2 is 4. And Big Brother says to Winston, oh no, Winston, you're just saying that. You don't believe 2 + 2 = 5 yet, and that's what we need. And so 2 + 2 does not equal 4 unless you believe in truth and objective truth and a greater, higher order that produced the society that we are in today. And that's part of the problem with science. Now, from the error of trying to remove an order from their philosophy of Hegel, a couple things happen. The biggest offender and worst case of this is, well, one of the things that Dawkins says is that Darwinism allows it to be intellectually fulfilled to be an atheist. Well, only if you're an asshole, but like apparently he is. But that's so true. So their version of Darwinism idea, which he stole, of course, from Wallace, was this Darwinism. But That's a truncated idea that that there is a physical basis to their religion of Darwinism. I will now move on to show to you that Darwinism itself is nothing more than a religion, and a mighty shitty religion too. Okay, so Darwinism. So there are certain dogmas that go along with Darwinism, which can never be proven, which will never be proven, that show that it's as much a religion as anything else. Before I start, I'm not saying that Darwinism is right or wrong, because that's a whole other thing that I can get into. But I will point out that nobody believes in Darwinism today, because they know that the DNA strain is way too long to be randomly mutated out. So that's why they believe in Vansporism, which is the idea that life rode in to the Earth, and the Earth was seeded, rode in on meteorites, and the Earth was seeded by space, which is create the great wag. Mark Stein to point out that, listen, all they've done is replace the belief in God with the belief in little green men. That's where we are today. So nobody believes in Darwinism today. But what's important is that the materialists and the meathead materialism that is underlying so much of our era today does believe in this religion of Darwinism, predicated on a certain dogmas. Number one, the virgin birth of life. Okay, it miraculously, in the soup of chemicals, pops into a being like spontaneous combustion, right? Life. Then there's if there's 8 million society, 8 million creatures that have walked the earth since then 8 million other virgin births, right? And then there's the natural, quote, natural selection, random mutations that caused all that, so-called random mutations that caused all that, and then it separates them out is natural selection, which is nothing more than survival of the fittest, which I point out is apparently the only one who realizes that natural the fittest is really survival of the most fit, which is really the opposite of the meek shall inherit the earth. And at the time Darwin came up with it, the English Empire needed an excuse for colonization. They'd gone from spreading the gospel and the good news of Jesus Christ to all the people in the world to, okay, now we have power and control, and now we need a reason to justify exterminating indigenous populations. And so what we're going to come up with, which is this survival of the fittest. Right. So starting with the first one. So now I, as a Catholic, get pilloried and whatnot because I believe in one virgin birth. But if you look at it, what else is the virgin birth of life according to Darwin? He goes, 2 billion years ago or so, in the chemical soup, life just went pop and snapped into existence. Just like you're walking down the street one day and you see somebody across the street and they spontaneously combust into fire, right? So, 2 billion years ago, out of the soup, spontaneous combustion, poof, created life. Okay, fine. One virgin birth, one virgin birth. I believe in one, you believe in one. Then, though, Darwin says, then, because he has to diminish human beings to be not made by God, he has to make them just to be another animal to justify him stealing and his atheism. Him stealing Wallace's idea and his atheism and his evil. He has to diminish mankind. We do nothing but descend from chemicals, and we're just animals, just like the other animals. He, of course, said that the blacks were closer to gorillas and were really animalistic, and the Irish, whereas he, the upper class English Anglo-Saxon, was so much superior. Blah blah blah. Right. But that's you can do that if you don't consider all people, made by God. And so that's why it's important for him to establish both the original, life starting without man, without God, and then the descent from man, which is his second book, descent from an original source, which is his second book, and then he has the Tree of Life, and everything comes from the first cell. Then each revolution of a species up until you get mankind. But to do that, you have to have these. Okay, there's some animal that's like a alligator, but not like an alligator, completely different, and then it births in a virgin birth a brand new species that pops into existence. And since there's been about 8 million species that we identified as walked the earth, that means there's not just one virgin birth, there's 8,000,001 virgin birth. Now, if you're going to look at it logically, right, Mr. Spock, my hero, right, there's reason, and then there's reason applied to reason, which we would call logic. So one of the things that Ackerman came up with is in one version of keep it simple, short, stupid. Cut out all the steps, and the simplest one wins. Well, I believe in one virgin birth, and you believe in 8,000,001. So, logically, it would make sense that mine is a lot more likely than yours. But these are all dogmas that can never be proven. Nobody has the TARDIS, it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, to go back in time and to be sitting there in that puddle and watch life created. And there's a great scientist, Tour, who's now calling out the fact that the chemists, because he's like the Einstein of chemistry today, running around with tons of papers and tons of advancements, and going, this whole creation of life stuff is just not working. It's just a fraud. They're never going to be able to prove it. They're never going to be able to do it in a lab. And they haven't been able to evolve one creature. Biology wise, they can make a fruit fly with a mutation of 4 wings, but it dies in the lab. Even with 4 wings, well, it's supposed to fly better, right? According to Darwin, but it doesn't. It dies in the lab. It could never survive. It's much more likely that what you have is, and the only mutations, quote, mutations they have are really cutting out chains of DNA, cutting out parts of DNA, which would make more sense to. I have a personal theory that it's not evolution, it's devolution. As you know, if you take one print of something, and then on a Xerox copy, you take another print on something on a Xerox copy, and then you take another print from that, it gets progressively fainter and fainter and fainter, and less accurate and less accurate and less accurate. So if you're going from that principle, as you have generation after generation, it probably is the case that DNA breaks down to the degree over time that it can't sustain itself anymore. The more generations you have, the less likely it is to be accurate, the less likely that you're going to get a viable species, which would explain too in the Bible that you have Methuselah at 1,000 years, and then mankind is descended down to 120, which is what scientists say is the actual lifespan. Theoretical lifespan of a human being today is 120 years. Or it could just be that God just said, at 1,000 years, oh man, you humans just getting into too much trouble. That's just too much time. And cut it down. And that could be that too. So who knows? Anyway, so that's 2 dogmas. And then the third dogma, of course, the sustained, unprovable, because you're never going to be able to prove what's better. Survival of the fittest, so-called fittest. What's fit? Natural selection. Well, what's natural selection? Survival of the fittest. Well, all right, you said survival of the fittest, but what exactly is naturally selected? Well, obviously, what's most fit, because it's here. And that's just like, quote, brute contingency, which is ridiculous. You're just saying it is what it is. Got a great story on that one of these days. It is what it is. All right. Well, but that's not. You're not breaking it down into its identifiable quantities. Again, how do you say something's naturally fit, naturally selected? Well, if you look at it, like I pointed out, survival of the fittest is just the exact opposite of Jesus's "the meek shall inherit the earth." Instead of saying the meek shall inherit earth, you're saying what that other guy, with the mustache used to say is the strong shall inherit the earth, right? This guy going to strong. The strong shall inherit the earth. Well, again, how do you prove that? How's that science? That is not science. That's a dogma. That's a religion. So Darwinists and biologists who want to say, oh, I have this material, material, proof of where we are today, are full of bullshit, because nobody's ever proven it, and you can't prove it. Nobody has a TARDIS. Nobody's Doctor Who. Although if he's out there, stop by. I just want to see. Come on, take me for a ride. But so that's the dogma of their religion of Darwinism. Turns out, all these people, all these meathead materialists, all these meathead intellectuals who think that they can rely on Darwin and Darwinian evolution as a natural explanation for life and for creation of human beings, are believing in a religion as much as any theist. And that's another fact too. And you can just observe the zealotry of a Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens, and you realize that they are as much a theist against God as any theist is for God. Whether it's Joel Osteen, I love, say the Pope, anybody. I'd say any theist. That the so-called atheists are as theistic as the theists are. So that's a couple more points on the Darwinism. All right, now what has happened with that though is the fraud put upon the people, because they think, oh yeah, sure, Darwinism is true, right? No. Okay, so there is no such thing as a blue dog or a blue rose. What's being called Darwinism, if you look at it mathematically, is not Darwinism. What you have is what human beings have known for the last 30,000 years that we've been doing it, is like at least the manipulation of species around us, and like particularly the domestication of the dog, which is probably the first. The domestication of the wolf into the dog is what's called conditional probability. Okay, mathematically, that's what it really is. What you do is you condition probability. So everybody's done this. You've done it. If you get a deck of cards, you take out all the number cards and you just have the face cards, right? So now you're just playing with the jacks, the queens, and the kings, and the aces. Maybe you're playing with the royal cards. You've conditioned probability. You've removed the chance of any 2s or 3s or 4s showing up, and now you have all the royal cards. Okay, you've conditioned probability from 52. Now you're down to whatever, 12. 13, right? That's what happens, and what most people consider evolution, right? The thing is, you're never going to get a number 2 if you've removed all the 2s, right? And you just have jacks and kings and queens you're playing with, and aces, right? And you're never going to get a cat from a dog, all right? You're never going to get a blue dog, because blue as a DNA color is not in the genome for dogs, just like it's not in the genome for roses. There are no blue roses unless they dye them. And so biology, as to that degree, is completely a fraud. The successes they've made are, of course, was the monk Mendel and Mendelian biology, which is that's the peas, the color of the peas, and so there's a ratio. It's the DNA genome of a species stays unbelievably the same and does nothing but work to keep itself exactly the same throughout the existence of that species. And what Mendel observed was that there's a ratio. That there'll be two on a chromosome. When you have two mating, you'll get a ratio, a predictable ratio. For example, I have 9 kids. The ratio for from my Ellie's and the ex-wife's is for eye color is blue brown. That means that I have a 1 in 4 chance of having a brown-eyed child. 9 kids, number 6 and number 7, brown eyes. The law of large numbers in mathematics, shows that it'll play out like when you're flipping a coin. It's not heads. It's heads. It's not heads, tails, heads, tails. The law of large numbers is that over time it will even out to be 50%. The law of large numbers applied to Mendelian genetics works out to 1 and 4. If I kept on having kids, no, no, love them all, but if it would still hold out to be 1 and 4. It wouldn't be number 6 and 7. You know, it doesn't. It's not going to be one. It's not going to be the fourth one out of each one. The law of large numbers. It's going to be, you know, it's not going to be number 4 and number 8 anymore. It's going to be number 1 and number 5. It's going to be, you know, over time, the law of large numbers. And that holds, though. But that holds. The law of large numbers holds. Is the math holds. So anyway, that manipulation of numbers in conditional probability is what you see in the breeds of dogs, and what you see in the variation of cats, and what you see in the variations of human beings, of everything, right? It's just a variation in probability of what's already there. There are no mutations that really work, and there's never been able to mutate one species into another species. And it's been 150 years, kids. If it wasn't, if they could do it, they would have done it. And they haven't done it because they're wrong. Darwin was wrong. Darwin was a religion. Materialism is a religion, and it's a particularly dumb religion. So, God of the gaps. So one of the things that the death of science that you've seen that we're at now in the end of modernism and postmodernism is because of the God of the gaps. Now that's what they say about theists. They say, "Oh, you theist, you just believe in the God of the gaps." And what they mean by that is, for example, this. So when the ancients were around and they saw a lightning strike, they didn't know what it was. They didn't know electricity, and so they see lightning and thunder, and they say, "Oh, it must be a god. It must be some creature like us that we call God, and that's lightning. That's the god of lightning, and that's Thor or Zeus, right?" And then they say that everything that you theists, you can't be a theist because you'll wind up doing that for everything. Actually, the biggest god of the gaps of all is what the meathead materialists believe in right now, which is why science has died. And we haven't progressed. If you think about it, since Einstein, in 1915 and Niels Bohr and the quantum revolution in give it the 1920s, 1930s and so, there's been no change in the actual science of our physics. And that's unbelievable. You think about it. So for 100 years, we're in 2025 right now. Science has not resolved that problem. There's been no big movement. All we've done is filled in a lot of little gaps. And even with filling in a lot of little gaps, we still haven't been taken the next step in science from the inconsistency between Einsteinian physics and quantum mechanics. And we're at the same gap. We're at the same problem, same conflict. We just made things a lot better because we figured out electromagnetism a lot better. We still haven't figured that out. But that has nothing to do with it. That's just techniques. That is the techniques that we're filling out. We're still living off of the fumes of Maxwell and Faraday, even before that. And the giants who came at the beginning of the 1900s, because science is dead. Because science believes in the biggest god of the gaps of all, randomness, which is what it is. So they say, well, must be randomness. And they just throw up their hands, which is exactly what they accuse theists of. And that's not what Newton was doing. Newton and company were able to penetrate into nature because the difference between Christianity and, say, Judaism and Muhammad and Islam is that there are codes. They are codes of outward behavior. And Christianity, though, Jesus took it to the next order above. I'll get on another rant. I don't better not. But he is purifying the interior person. And so whereas the old codes were saying something like, "Oh, don't be adulterous," Jesus said, "Well, wait a minute. If you look at another woman with lust, sorry, Mary, not Mary, but a million of them, then you are guilty of adultery too," right? And what Jesus was trying to do was purify the interior person. And guess what? There's a huge side effect to that, because if you wind up controlling your natural urges and predilections and beating them down, you can perceive reality much clearer. And that's, of course, and you have the faith that there's an order to the universe with God on top of it. Then you can be like Newton and say, well, I've read the book of the Bible. Now I want to learn learned a lot about God's mind. Now I want to read the book of nature and learn some more about God's mind, right? So it wasn't that. So the early scientists were able to create, the people who created science were able to penetrate into nature and demythicize nature, because they believed in a higher order who is actually, and a higher God, actually outside of the universe, who can intervene with a miracle if he so chooses, and who can change things if he so chooses. Jesus coming down, to meet us. But that there's an order that pretty much kicks along itself, that you can use your mind and your God-given reason, which will be reasonable and will be logical, to penetrate. And so when you give that all over to the God of the gaps of randomness, guess what? You stop thinking. You stop trying to penetrate your mind, which is exactly where we are today. So there is no such thing as randomness. But how can you say that? Well, I turn back on you. Try and prove randomness, right? You can't. Things that you think are random probably are not random. And I'll tell you why. Again, with the math. 1960s, I forget exactly when, there was a meteorologist who had a computer program. And so part of this is because I'm old enough to know what it was like before computers were ubiquitous. One of my father's best friends at the Arsenal was, of course, the great Al Case, who saw the first computer. Right, was his Enox, which was the size of a huge room, right? And he was there when it was taken apart and replaced by the second computer, right? Well, before computers were ubiquitous, people like me that were in like physics programs had to find randomness a certain way. Versus today, okay, so what we had to do, I'm getting to Lorenz and the chaos math, right? So it used to be, so today, the problem is, if you're not of a certain age, you think randomness is, there's a thing called like a random access, like computers, like they have RAM, right? Random access memory, right? And you think it's actually random, but it's not, right? So you have to be trained in the old way to find randomness, which I'll get to in a second, right? So today, what they think of randomness is, I say somebody, a computer program is saying, take pi, divide it by 2, and take every third number, right? Now, it looks like it's random, but if you know that algorithm I just did, take pi, divide it by 2, take every third number, and you knew that, then that so-called random looking number then immediately becomes completely predictable, right? And that's like what, quote, computer randomness today. Or it's something of the order of this, which is the other way to create randomness today is you say I'm gonna have a time period of 3 seconds or whatever, and a human being is going to push a button, either 1, 2, or 3, right? And then that's going to be our random generator number. And so a human being can go, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, like that forever, right? And human beings can generate seemingly random things because they can act seemingly random, because another thing the meathead intellectuals don't believe in is free will. So that free will, you exercising your free will, you can create randomness. However, that means, if you think about it, randomness is nothing than the personification of human free will, which they don't believe in, right? But he does believe in. So anyway, what the heck? Battery power down to 10%. Oh my God. I'm going to start all over. Anyway, we'll see how long it goes. So in 1961, Lorenz goes in meteorology. He's got a computer program, puts it in a program, walks away, gets a cup of coffee, comes back, and he sees this, which is the Lorentz butterfly. And what it is, it's an amazing thing that looks completely random and yet is completely ordered, right? Basically, if you know the beginning place of where it started, you will get the same Lorentz attractor. The reason why they call it attractor is because the numbers seem to attract around certain numbers. Here, there will always be numbers here and not here. It looks like it's random, but it's not, okay? And that is because it's based on this math. Now, back in my day when I was taught things, just to finish the random story. So in my day, when we were going to create a random number, what you did is you took a book, and we had a huge book this big, and you flipped it open, and then you randomly close your eyes and put your finger on a number, and that was the number you got, and that was a quote random number. It's again human agency, this being this being personified into randomness, quote randomness, the idea of randomness, but it's not. It's just our ability beyond our ability to computate. So anyway, this is the formula that came up with. Now, what happened was, just to look over here, is back in my day, you had to do everything like this. You had to isolate x, and on one side of the equation, look, I can see it, and then you would get a definition for x, right? If you tried to do anything like this, they would beat you to death with a ruler. You were never allowed to do this, which is the whole creation of fractal math and chaos math, which is basically the idea that new x is equal to initial position x plus yada yada yada, which is actually a formula, right? Yada yada yada. Meaning there are controlling factors of this, and these controlling factors, if you know what they are and you know where the system begins, then you know exactly where what x is. And so things that look random turn out not to be random. And so this is Douglas Adams' idea about why all coastlines look the same. Coastlines look the same, and you can recognize them as coastlines because of this math. Fractals, that's this math. Snowflakes, you can identify everything as snowflake. Every snowflake looks identical, but if you knew the controlling parameters and you knew where that little droplet started, you could make every single snowflake look every single one exactly the same. Which is, if you ever seen the fractal, fractal math that they make, is exactly what they do. So things that look random turn out not to be random. So then again, how do you prove randomness? You can't. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to sit here and watch and see if something random happens, because it doesn't happen, right? It wouldn't be random if it did. And the things that look random turn out not to be random. And that's the dogma of randomness. So randomness itself is a religion, and believing it's a dogma of a religion, and believing it is something that the meatheads have fallen into. Now we're stuck with atheism. So atheism is a shitty religion, because you think about it for a second. Say a theist believes that there can be an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good God, right? I can imagine that. But if he was all those things, then he could definitely hide behind me. And in a universe that's 93 million light years wide and has 2 trillion galaxies like the Milky Way, which we're in, and in the Milky Way there's 100 billion stars like the sun. If he wanted to, he could pretty much hide from us, hide from me. Now the atheists go, oh no, I am so smart, I am so arrogant, I am all knowing, I am all powerful, and I am all good, and I know God's not out there. And it's like, no, maybe he's just hiding from you because, you're an asshole. I don't know. Have you ever believed that? But no. They know that the God's not out there. Now, that's a stupid position. You have to allow in a universe this big for the possibility that there's God, right? But that's what atheism is. And it's predicated all on all that religious dogma that I just gave you. And so now we come to the question about poor Jordan Peterson, because he makes this statement where he's doing the same thing the atheists are doing, right? He's in a religious structure, and he's not criticizing it. He's saying that the Jungian, it's a Jungian archetype, meaning, there's this type of idea that human civilizations have, blah 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 blah. You fill it in. and it might be written on the heart of mankind, but he's not saying that there's only one way it could have gotten written on the heart of mankind. He's fallen for what the big loser has done from the Garden of Eden. Now, I did a little study into Jordan. He had an interview with his father. Turns out Jordan Peterson, because I'm looking for why he would be atheistic like this. Turns out Jordan Peterson's father is a sweetheart, just like he is. He's a really good person, like an amazingly great person. Obviously Jordan Peterson had a great father and a great upbringing, and I'm sure that's why he's such a great father to his kids, right? So usually there's some break with the father, with your earthly father, that then leads to a break with the heavenly father that creates your atheism. Not in Jordan's case. But the more I think about it and saw the interview, the more I realized that Jordan Peterson, though, comes from a small town in Saskatchewan, Canada. So he was like the first person with an advanced degree. And even though he's a genius, what I think is happening with Jordan is that he's insecure, even as smart as he is, because he comes from a small middle working class town. He's insecure because he sees, just like Arthur Schlesinger, I have to give him credit. He was a great writer and an okay historian. His father was a Harvard professor, so there's idea is that it's like generation to generation, and I guess he's insecure because he comes from the roots that he does. But that's no reason not to acknowledge the truth that's in front of your face that he obviously knows, which is this cannot be an accident. And so, if he's going to recognize and criticize atheists for living in a religious structure and then criticizing it, he should also be able to look at himself. And I think what a lot of ancient intellectuals do, and I'm not saying he falls for this, but other than him, what they do is they fall for the arrogance of intelligence. And it's just like the fall. It's literally the lies told by who to mankind. It's like, I'm going to play on your ego and play on your arrogance and say, oh, look, there goes the tree of knowledge. What's God keeping from you? Now, one of the greatest comebacks ever was John Lennox's when he said, why do you believe in a God that would keep knowledge from you? And he goes, are you kidding me? There's definitely things that are prohibited. I don't want to know what human flesh tastes like. I don't want to be a cannibal. I don't even know what baby murdering is. There's definitely things that human beings, that is prohibited knowledge. And now what we need to learn is to be able to discern what is good knowledge and what is bad knowledge. And what these intellectuals do that make them meatheads is that they're falling for this ancient trap of their arrogance and being played to by their arrogance. Oh, I can do this all without a belief in God. Problem with that is because the way the system is created is that also means if you're just going to be a meathead intellectual, you don't believe in the soul, you don't believe in the spirit, you don't believe in a personality, you don't believe in poetry, you don't believe in philosophy, you don't believe in math, you don't believe in physics, you don't believe in any of the sciences because it's all, quote, random. And you can't even discern good and bad. You can't even discern right and wrong. You have no morality. You're an evil asshole. And that's why atheism always fails. And so, too, will meathead materialism. So, as the great Freddie Blassie used to say, you're nothing but a pencil neck geek. Thank you, Freddie. Classy Freddie Blassie from WWE. Don't be a pencil neck geek, kids. My spiritual babies. No, Jordan Peterson's not a pencil neck geek. Eventually I'll figure it out. He's a smart guy. So my spiritual babies, that's another episode. We're gonna have to close it out before the computer turns off. The phone turns off. And so we'll have to continue on with our psychohistory as we try to make it a thing. And that's where we are today, my spiritual babies. And we'll be back in another episode to talk about how I think Pearl Davis saved womankind or something like that. We'll work on it. All right. God bless, kids.